Listen to the silence within these walls, and you hear the pulse of a nation. It stands at the center of Delhi, not merely as a relic of the past, but as the enduring heartbeat of India. For centuries, these massive stone structures have watched empires rise, crumble, and eventually give way to the birth of a free republic. This is the Red Fort. It is a monument that carries the weight of Mughal grandeur in every carved pillar and holds the echoes of the struggle for independence in every courtyard. To walk through these gates is to step into the timeline of a civilization, from the height of imperial power to the defining moments of the 20th century. This site has stood as a witness to it all. Today, we peel back the layers of stone and time to uncover the reality behind the legend. We will explore the origins of this architectural marvel, the violent upheavals it endured, and the secrets hidden deep within its private chambers. Stay until the very end, as I reveal details about this monument that have remained obscure to most travelers. This is not just a tour of a fortress. It is a journey through the soul of a country. Stand before the perimeter and look up. The scale of the Red Fort hits you first. Massive walls of red sandstone stretch across the horizon, glowing with a deep, earthy intensity under the sun. These are not merely barriers. They are the remnants of a self-sustaining city that once pulsed with life. Within this enclosure, palaces, sprawling gardens, and thriving markets defined an entire era of governance. Every block of stone, every sharp angle of the fortification speaks to a level of engineering that defied the limitations of its time. It is this sheer scale and historical integrity that caught the attention of the world. In 2007, the international community solidified its status when UNESCO officially designated the site as a World Heritage Landmark. This recognition was not just about preserving old stone, it was an acknowledgement of the fort as a global treasure. It serves as a bridge between the ancient world and our modern understanding of cultural preservation. By protecting these walls, we protect a narrative that spans centuries, ensuring that the legacy of this fortress remains accessible to the entire world. It stands today as a beacon, reminding every visitor that some structures are too significant to be lost to the passage of time. The vision behind these walls did not begin with stone, but with a singular, restless ambition. Emperor Shah Jahan, already known for his pursuit of architectural perfection, looked at the existing capital of Agra and found it wanting. The city had served the Mughals well, but he demanded a center of power that would command the landscape of the future. In 1638, he made a decision that would shift the entire trajectory of the empire. He ordered the court to pack its archives, its treasures, and its legions, and prepare for a migration. He turned his gaze toward the banks of the Yamuna River in Delhi. This was not a mere whim of a ruler. It was the birth of a grand design. Shah Jahan sought to establish a new capital, one that would be entirely of his own making, a city named Shah Jahanabad. He wanted a seat of power that reflected the absolute reach of his reign, a place where the infrastructure would mirror the sophistication of his court. He began to map out a site that would integrate the natural flow of the river with the rigid lines of imperial authority. The move was set in motion, marking the end of an era in Agra and the beginning of a monumental project that would redefine the skyline of northern India forever. To manifest this vision, Shah Jahan turned to the master of form, Ustad Ahmad Lahori. The architect did not merely draw blueprints. He coordinated a massive mobilization of resources that would reshape the earth itself. In 1639, the ground was broken. This was the start of a 9-year operation that demanded constant, grueling exertion. Thousands of workers arrived at the banks of the Yamuna, their movements synchronized by the architect's rigid schedule. Stone by stone, the base foundations were laid deep into the silt. The logistics were staggering. Every block of red sandstone had to be quarried, transported, and carved to exact specifications. Night and day, the rhythmic sound of chisels hitting rock became the heartbeat of the site. Lahori monitored every phase, ensuring that the structural integrity matched the aesthetic demands of the emperor. As the years progressed, the structure rose higher, transforming from a chaotic construction site into a precise fortified grid. The labor was relentless, a continuous cycle of hauling, cutting, and setting that pushed the limits of 17th century engineering. By the end of the 9th year, the scaffolding finally came down, revealing the finished frame of what would become the imperial residence. The empty field was gone, replaced by a permanent testament to human endurance and architectural precision. Beyond the fortified perimeter, the life of the palace centered on the Diwani Am. Stepping through the archways, the scale of the hall immediately commands focus. 60 pillars of red sandstone carved the space into a grid of perfect symmetry. This hall served as the primary interface between the throne and the subjects of the empire. The floor plan was designed for visibility and order, ensuring that from every corner, the presence of the emperor was absolute. The pillars support a ceiling that once echoed with the petitions of commoners and the rulings of the court. Here, the emperor sat on a raised platform, elevated above the crowd, listening to the grievances and requests brought before him. The structure enforced a rigid protocol of hierarchy, where justice was delivered not in private, but under the scrutiny of the gathered public. The space functioned as a theater of statecraft, where the power of the Mughal throne was made visible through the sheer density of the stone columns and the calculated arrangement of the audience. Every pillar stands as a testament to the administrative reach of the 17th century court, serving as the physical bridge between the ruler and the ruled. Moving deeper into the complex, the red sandstone gives way to the cool, smooth surface of white marble. This is the Diwani Khas, the hall of private audience. The transition is abrupt. The coarse, public atmosphere of the outer halls vanishes, replaced by a space designed for the inner circle of the empire. Light reflects off the marble surfaces, creating a stark, luminous environment that distinguishes this chamber from every other structure in the fort. Beneath the ornate ceiling, the hall remains a monument to absolute authority. It was here that the emperor met with his ministers and foreign dignitaries, away from the public eye. Carved into the wall near the ceiling, a precise inscription catches the eye, declaring in golden relief, "If there is a paradise on earth, it is this, it is this, it is this." The marble pillars, inlaid with intricate designs, support the weight of the roof while maintaining an air of effortless grace. There is no clutter here, only the clean lines of stone and the weight of history. Every inch of the floor is polished to reflect the movement of the guards and the court officials, reinforcing the exclusive nature of the space. It is a calculated display of wealth and proximity to the throne, standing as the most refined core of the Mughal residence. Beyond the halls of governance, the fort sheltered a more private existence. Tucked away from the public eye sits the Moti Masjid, or Pearl Mosque. Its white marble surfaces catch the sunlight, providing a space for personal prayer distinct from the grandeur of the state courts. The acoustics here are muted, designed for silence rather than the proclamation of decrees. Just a short walk away, the Rang Mahal served as the primary residence for the royal ladies. This structure functioned as a self-contained sanctuary, isolated by thick walls and intricate screening. Its design focused on climate control and privacy, utilizing water channels that once flowed through the floor to cool the interior air during the intense summer heat. The architecture here favors smaller, connected rooms that create a sense of sheltered seclusion. While the outer fort dealt in the currency of power and public perception, the Rang Mahal and its surroundings were built for the rhythms of daily life. The complex features sheltered courtyards that remain shaded throughout the day, providing a quiet reprieve from the heat and the noise of the city beyond. Every detail in these chambers was calibrated for comfort, defining the domestic scale of the Mughal residence within the fortified city walls. The walls of the fort did not merely protect the royalty, they enclosed a fully functional city that operated independently of the capital outside. For 2 centuries, this space housed thousands of soldiers, craftsmen, clerks, and merchants. Massive gates regulated the flow of goods and people, turning the interior into a labyrinth of specialized districts. The bazaars were the pulse of this city, where silk, spices, and precious metals changed hands daily. Every supply needed for the imperial court was produced within these boundaries. From intricate metalwork to woven textiles, water was directed through a complex network of channels, ensuring the gardens remained lush and the fountains flowed regardless of the external climate. This infrastructure allowed the Mughal court to maintain its influence without needing to constantly look outward for resources. It was a peak of administrative and cultural stability, a microcosm where the empire could refine its arts and governance in isolation. The city operated on a strict, regimented schedule, with the sound of drums marking the shifts of the guards and the opening of the markets. This self-contained environment allowed the Mughal influence to permeate every aspect of life, establishing a standard of living that defined the zenith of their power and social structure. The stability that defined the Mughal court began to vibrate with a new, discordant rhythm as the 18th century progressed. Beyond the red sandstone walls, the regional power balance shifted, and the immense wealth concentrated within the fort became a visible target. Intelligence reports arriving at the gates spoke of armies moving across the distant frontiers and governors asserting independence in the provinces. The focus of the court, once directed toward internal administration and cultural refinement, was forced to account for the movement of hostile forces. Observers noted that the flow of goods through the marketplaces slowed, and the gates were monitored with greater scrutiny than in previous decades. The air within the courtyards grew heavy with the weight of unconfirmed rumors. Merchants spoke in hushed tones of mounting tensions in the north, while the military commanders increased the frequency of patrols along the battlements. The fort, once an island of absolute control, found itself exposed to the shifting currents of regional ambition. Every structural advantage, from the height of the walls to the depth of the moats, was now measured against the potential for siege. The era of unquestioned dominance was ending, replaced by a defensive posture that permeated every layer of the imperial infrastructure. The rumors solidified into reality by the early months of 1739. Nadir Shah of Persia had crossed the Indus, and his forces moved with a speed that bypassed the standard defensive treaties of the era. Within the Red Fort, the transition from alert to panic was immediate. The gates were reinforced with iron-bound timber, and the massive cannons along the battlements were cleared of debris, their barrels aimed toward the northern horizon. Every courier arriving at the Lahori gate brought news of scorched villages and the rapid collapse of provincial resistance. The garrison was doubled, and the royal guards occupied the inner courtyards, their movements sharp and frantic. Inside the Diwan-i-Am, the routine of public audience halted entirely as the court focused on the logistics of survival. Walls that had stood for nearly a century were now the only barrier between the accumulated riches of the empire and the approaching army. The sky to the north grew dark with dust clouds, signaling the arrival of the vanguard. Commanders paced the ramparts, measuring the distance to the enemy camp and calculating the time remaining before the first assault. The fort, built for administration and display, stood braced for the impact of a total war it was no longer equipped to win. The final defense failed in the spring of 1739. Nadir Shah entered the Red Fort not as an invited guest, but as a conqueror. His soldiers swept through the courtyards, forcing their way into the private chambers where the wealth of generations lay stored. The Diwan-i-Khas, once a sanctuary of quiet diplomacy, became the center of a systematic operation. Men with hammers and pry bars dismantled the legendary peacock throne, breaking its intricate frame to extract the gold and precious stones. The Koh-i-Noor diamond, a centerpiece of imperial authority, was seized and transferred to the Persian camp. Every chest in the treasury was overturned, the contents dumped into carts and hauled toward the gates. They stripped the silver from the ceilings and emptied the storehouses of every coin and gem. The halls that once resonated with the orders of the emperor now echoed with the shouts of soldiers and the grinding of wheels against stone. By the time the occupation force withdrew, the inner sanctums were bare. The walls remained, but the soul of the structure had been extracted. The loss was total, leaving the Mughal power base physically and symbolically gutted, a hollow monument to a former dominance that would never fully recover. By 1857, the Red Fort was no longer a palace. It was a fortress under siege. The uprising erupted, and the courtyards that once held quiet debates became staging grounds for armed resistance. Smoke poured from the battlements, obscuring the sky as the sound of musket fire echoed against the marble walls of the Diwan-i-Khas. The air grew thick with the acrid smell of black powder, stinging the eyes and choking the lungs of everyone trapped inside. Cannonballs struck the massive red sandstone, sending shards of stone flying across the grounds like shrapnel. Soldiers moved between the pillars, firing into the haze, their shouts drowned out by the relentless roar of artillery. Buildings that had once housed royal archives were repurposed as ammunition depots, while the gardens were torn up to create defensive positions. The once serene Hayat Bakhsh Bagh was trampled, its fountains dry and choked with debris. Every corner of the complex became a flashpoint. As the British forces tightened their perimeter, the structure groaned under the weight of the bombardment. The era of the Mughal emperors had reached its breaking point, and the fort stood as a burning, crumbling witness to the violent collapse of its 200-year reign. The smoke cleared, revealing a landscape of ruin. Bahadur Shah Zafar remained inside, anchored to the chambers that his ancestors had built. There were no grand speeches, only the heavy thud of boots on marble floors as the occupation forces moved in. The emperor was taken into custody, stripped of the last vestiges of his authority. He watched from the back of a carriage as the massive gates of the fort groaned shut behind him. This was not a departure, it was a permanent severance. The carriage rolled away from the sandstone walls, crossing the threshold into exile toward Rangoon. Inside the fort, the halls stood empty. The corridors that had pulsed with the life of a court for 2 centuries fell into a sudden, unnatural stillness. The dynasty had not just lost a battle, it had lost its home, its history, and its future. The keys turned in the locks, and the Mughal reign officially dissolved into the dust of the courtyard. The silence left behind was absolute, a heavy weight that settled over the red stone, signaling the end of an era that would never return to these grounds. The occupation was not merely political, it was a physical erasure of the past. British engineers surveyed the complex, marking marble arches and ornate pavilions for demolition. They tore down delicate stone screens and leveled interior structures that had stood for generations, claiming they obstructed military sightlines. Where the original artistry remained, they applied a thick, uniform coat of red paint, effectively masking the intricate craftsmanship of the Mughal builders. This was a calculated aesthetic shift, designed to strip the site of its royal identity and force it into the mold of a colonial barracks. Stone masons worked under military supervision, clearing debris to make room for rows of utilitarian barracks and storage sheds. The iconic walls were reinforced, not for beauty, but for defense against the very population the fort was meant to serve. Every strike of a hammer against the white marble echoed across the courtyards, serving as a constant reminder of the new order. The locals watched from the city streets as the fort was systematically stripped of its heritage. This forced transformation did more than change the color of the stone. It deepened a quiet, growing resentment that began to simmer beneath the surface of Delhi, turning the monument into a symbol of foreign imposition. By 1945, the fort had become the stage for a confrontation that would ignite the entire nation. The British command convened the Red Fort trials, bringing officers of the Azad Hind Fauj into the very heart of the complex to face charges of treason. They intended to demonstrate absolute legal authority, but the trial achieved the opposite. As the proceedings began, the news rippled through the streets of Delhi. People gathered by the thousands outside the massive ramparts, their collective presence pressing against the stone gates. Inside, the officers stood firm, their defiance echoing through the halls of the Diwan-e-Am, which had been converted into a courtroom. The arguments presented within those walls were not just legal defenses, they were declarations of national sovereignty. The public fury grew with every day the trial continued. Strikes crippled the city, and protests erupted in every corner of the country, all eyes fixed on the fort. The British attempt to silence the resistance instead gave it a focal point. The walls that once stood as a symbol of colonial power now served as a lightning rod for the final movement toward liberation. The demand for independence was no longer a whisper. It was a roar that vibrated through the red sandstone, signaling that the end of imperial rule was imminent. The morning of the 15th of August, 1947, broke with a different kind of silence. The streets around the fort were packed, a sea of people pressing toward the Lahori gate. The iron locks, long maintained by the colonial guard, were pushed aside. Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru stepped onto the ramparts, his silhouette sharp against the morning sky. In his hands, he held the tricolor. The crowd went still as he moved to the flagpole. He pulled the rope, and the fabric caught the breeze, snapping open against the red sandstone backdrop. The sound of the flag unfurling echoed across the courtyards, a sharp, rhythmic crack that signaled a definitive end to 2 centuries of imperial rule. Thousands of voices erupted at once, a roar that shook the very foundations of the structure. The gates, once closed to the people of the city, now stood wide open. This was not merely a ceremony. It was an act of reclamation. As the flag climbed, the fort shed its identity as a garrison and returned to its role as the heartbeat of the nation. The weight of the past vanished, replaced by the immediate, electric reality of sovereignty. For the first time in generations, the wind blew through the Diwaniyam without the shadow of an occupier, marking the dawn of a new era. Beyond the celebrated ramparts and the echoes of 1947, the fort holds layers of history that remain tucked away from the casual observer. The complex is not an isolated island of stone. It is physically tethered to the older Salamgarh fort, constructed in 1546. An ancient, unseen connection links these two massive structures, forming a defensive network that predates the Mughal expansion into this territory. These hidden passages served as conduits for movement and security, effectively blending 2 distinct eras of fortification into a single, formidable entity. The mystery deepens when one steps into the Diwani Khas. Today, the ceiling appears as a standard architectural feature, yet historical records reveal a different reality. Once, this vaulted space shimmered with a ceiling cast entirely in solid silver. It was a testament to the immense wealth of the era, a canopy meant to reflect the grandeur of the court below. However, when financial crises gripped the empire, the silver was stripped away and replaced with copper. The transition from precious metal to common alloy mirrors the shifting fortunes of the dynasty itself. These remnants of lost splendor and subterranean links transform the fort from a static monument into a living, evolving archive of secrets waiting to be uncovered by those who look beyond the surface. Deep within the secure confines of the palace grounds, the fort operated on a scale that few outsiders ever witnessed. The interior was once home to the Mina Bazaar, a marketplace designed with absolute exclusivity in mind. Here, commerce did not look toward the city's streets. It turned inward, serving only the royal ladies and their attendants. It was a private world where silk, rare spices, and fine jewelry changed hands behind walls that kept the rest of the empire at a distance. Yet, this delicate internal economy was shielded by engineering of brutal efficiency. The outer perimeter walls, rising 75 feet into the air, were built to withstand more than just the elements. These ramparts were constructed with a thickness and geometry that rendered them virtually impregnable to the siege tactics of the 17th century. Where the Mina Bazaar fostered a space of refined trade and intimate social interaction, the perimeter stood as a massive, unyielding barrier of red sandstone. The contrast is sharp. The fort functioned simultaneously as a bustling center of luxury and a fortress capable of enduring prolonged bombardment. It was this calculated duality, the soft interior protected by an unshakable exterior, that allowed the Mughal heart to beat safely for over 200 years, turning the complex into a self-sustaining city built for both governance and survival. Today, the transition from a seat of imperial power to a destination for the world is complete. Thousands of people pass through the Lahori Gate every single day, their footsteps echoing where ministers once stood and emperors held court. The stone corridors, once restricted to the elite, now serve as a public stage for discovery. As the sun dips behind the horizon, the atmosphere changes entirely. The sound and light show transforms the silent red sandstone into a canvas of narrative, projecting the long history of the fort directly onto its ancient surfaces. The voices of the past rise from the darkness, narrating the rise and fall of empires, the struggles of the uprising, and the eventual dawn of independence. Visitors sit in the courtyard, watching shadows play against the marble structures, experiencing the weight of centuries in a single evening. It is no longer just a monument to be viewed. It is a space to be felt. The fort remains a living entity, constantly bridging the gap between the 17th century and the present. It welcomes those who seek to understand the heartbeat of the nation, proving that while dynasties may fade, the structure itself remains a permanent witness to the march of time, standing tall for every new generation that walks its storied paths. The Red Fort is more than stone and mortar. It is the enduring emblem of our pride and the silent witness to our hard-won sovereignty. To walk through these gates is to touch the very foundation of our nation's story. If you find yourself in Delhi, make the journey to stand where history was forged. Experience the scale, feel the texture of the gates and stone, and listen to the echoes of the past that still resonate within these walls. If this journey through time brought you closer to our shared heritage, please like, subscribe, and share this video with others. We want to hear from you. What specific part of this monument's history fascinates you the most? Share your thoughts in the comments below. As we close this chapter, remember that the strength of our past is the foundation of our future. Carry the spirit of this place with you, and never forget the sacrifices made for our freedom. Thank you for walking this path with us. Until next time, Jai Hind.